December 18th, 1944. Adlerhorst, the Eagle's Eyrie, buried in the pine-covered slopes of the Taunus Mountains. Outside, snow drifts against the concrete bunkers. Inside the main map room, the air is thick with cigarette smoke, sweat, and the faint, nauseating smell of stale coffee and wet wool. You are standing behind a row of Feldgrau uniforms, shoulder to shoulder with men who have been fighting this war since Poland. Boots scuff against the floor as officers shift their weight, trying not to cough in the heavy fog. The only real light comes from the lamps above the giant wall map, the Western Front spread out in colored pins and grease pencil arrows. At the head of the room, a short, slightly stooped figure leans over the table. Adolf Hitler's left hand trembles on the map edge. His right grips a pencil like a weapon. The pupils behind his wire-rimmed glasses are too bright, too busy, darting over the lines that mark the Ardennes. His voice, when he speaks, is hoarse but forceful, the practiced tone of a man who has shouted down dissent for years. "The offensive," he says, stabbing the Ardennes bulge with the pencil, "will continue. The enemy is weak. We have seized the initiative. There will be no withdrawal." Nowhere. No one moves. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt stares at the map, his tired eyes tracing the red pins that mark German units. He knows the truth, those pins don't show empty fuel tanks. Divisions that are divisions only on paper. Battered infantry regiments down to a few hundred men. Beside him, General Alfred Jodl shifts a folder in his hands. Inside are the latest reports, Allied air power building again as the skies clear. Panzer spearheads stalled for lack of fuel. The Meuse still far out of reach. He swallows and glances at Wilhelm Keitel, who stands rigid, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on their leader like a worshipper before an altar. Hitler doesn't look at the reports. He looks at his own war, the one that exists on his map and in his mind. The Americans are cowards. He continues. "One hard blow and they will break. Rundstedt, model your armies will push through to Antwerp. The British and Americans will be split. They will sue for peace. It is only a matter of will." From the far end of the table, Colonel General Heinz Guderian clears his throat. He is here as Chief of the General Staff, responsible for the Eastern Front, the front that is about to explode. His uniform is creased, his eyes are ringed with fatigue. In his hand is another folder, marked in red, "My Führer." Guderian begins carefully. "If I may first speak on the situation in the East, our reconnaissance confirms enormous Soviet concentrations along the Vistula. Their bridgeheads opposite Warsaw and Baranov are bristling with artillery. We must assume a major offensive will begin in January, perhaps earlier. The Eastern Army needs reserves. At once." Hitler straightens. Slowly, as if resisting gravity itself. The room goes even quieter. Somewhere, a chair creaks. "We are not discussing the East," Hitler says, his voice suddenly icy. "We are discussing the decisive blow in the West. The Russians have exhausted themselves. They have no more men. They cannot attack." Guderian hesitates, then pushes on. He has seen the aerial photographs, the intelligence estimates. With respect, "My Führer, our own figures show at least 200 Soviet divisions along the Vistula alone. Their tank and artillery parks." Hitler slams the pencil down on the table. "Rubbish," he snaps. "Lies and exaggerations from pessimists. The Russians cannot launch such an offensive. They have no trucks, no fuel, no competent officers. I know these things. I understand them." The generals exchange glances, quick, sidelong looks that last less than a heartbeat. No one speaks. Hitler turns back to the Ardennes map, as if the Eastern Front has ceased to exist. With a sweeping motion, he draws a fresh arrow thrusting toward Antwerp. "We will reinforce the 6th Panzer Army," he declares. 2 more Panzer divisions and 3 Volksgrenadier divisions will be transferred immediately to Sepp Dietrich. That will give him the strength to finish off the Americans and reach the Meuse. Rundstedt's eyes flick to the operations officer at the side table. The man looks down at his papers helplessly. There are no such divisions. On paper. Perhaps formations that exist as names and skeleton staffs scattered across Germany. Without tanks, without heavy weapons, without trained men. Jodl clears his throat. My Führer, the additional panzer divisions you mention, he chooses each word like a man picking his way through a minefield. They are not yet fully formed. Some have no tanks at all. Their personnel. Details, Hitler cuts him off. The tanks will be delivered. The men will be ready. The enemy will crack first. You always doubt, Jodl. You always see difficulties. I see the solution. We must show iron will. Victory or death. The phrase hangs in the air. Victory or death. For years. Many in this room have believed him or forced themselves to. They have gambled on his intuition, his gambler's nerve, and watched him snatch victory out of impossible situations. France, 1940. Kharkov, 1943. Even now, part of them wants to believe that the old magic is still there. But winter 1944 is different. The enemy is across the German border. Allied bombers prowl the skies by day, tearing cities apart. In East Prussia, in Silesia, German civilians are already on the roads with handcarts. The Reich is shrinking to the size of this room. Hitler leans forward, his words coming faster now, his voice rising, eyes gleaming with a feverish light. The Führer Reserve will provide what is needed, he says. We have hidden resources, formations the enemy does not suspect. New U-boats, miracle weapons, the jet fighters, the V-weapons. The tide is turning. One powerful blow, and the coalition against us will collapse. Rundstedt feels a chill that has nothing to do with the winter outside. Hidden resources, phantom divisions, miracles. This is not strategy. This is a man clinging to dreams while the walls burn. He realizes, with a clarity that almost hurts, that the war being fought in Hitler's mind no longer matches the war on the ground. Beside him, Guderian stares at the Eastern Front map rolled up at his elbow, the one no one wanted to see tonight. In his imagination, he unrolls it, sees the red front line like a wound across Poland, feels the pressure building behind it like a storm. He hears again the reconnaissance officer's flat voice. The Russians have more tanks in that bridgehead than we have on the entire Eastern Front. Herr Generaloberst. He looks back at Hitler, still talking about divisions that do not exist, orders that cannot be carried out, victories that cannot be won. And in that moment, more than one man in the room knows it. The leader of Germany is no longer living in the same war as his generals. January 9th, 1945. The Reich Chancellery in Berlin. Snowflakes swirl in the floodlights above, then melt into black slush on the ruined streets. Inside, deep below the shattered city, the air in the Situation Room feels too warm, too close, thick with stale tobacco and the smell of damp concrete. You're at the back of the room again, notebook in hand, watching as the same faces gather around a different map. This time, it is not the Ardennes, but the East spread out across the table. Poland, East Prussia, Silesia. The Vistula line, drawn in thick blue pencil, is bowed and fragile. Like a wall made of paper, Guderian stands at the map, a wooden pointer in his hand. His voice is clipped, controlled, but there is an urgency underneath it that anyone can hear. Here, my Führer. And here, he says, tapping the bridgeheads at Baranov and Magnusiu, strong Soviet concentrations, confirmed by aerial reconnaissance, heavy armor, massed artillery. We estimate they will be ready to attack within days. Hitler sits at the end of the table, slightly hunched in his chair, a green shade casting a yellowish light across the map and his face. His left hand shakes, fingers rubbing against each other. In front of him, untouched, lies a stack of situation reports. He has not opened them. Around him sit Keitel, Jodl, Bormann, and a scattering of staff officers. Their eyes move between the map and their leader, as if trying to decide which is more dangerous to look at. Guderian continues, forcing the words out. We must pull back Army Group A to the Oder while there is still time. Shorten the line. Free reserves. If we do not, the Russians will break through here, and the entire southern wing will be lost. Berlin will be directly threatened. The pointer raps the map again. The sound echoes in the low-ceilinged room. Hitler finally looks up. His eyes are tired but bright, the way a fever burns behind the skin. Withdraw, he says softly, as if tasting a foul word. Always the same, always withdrawals, always retreats. No, the position on the Vistula must be held. Every meter, the fortresses must fight to the last bullet. Whoever cannot do that will be court-martialed. Keitel nods instantly, relief flooding his features now that a clear order has been given. Jodl's expression tightens, just for a second, then smooths again into practiced neutrality. Guderian stares at Hitler, as if trying to decide whether he has been heard at all. My Führer, with respect, we have no reserves left in the East. None. The divisions are down to a fraction of their strength. If we do not move now, there will be nothing between the Russians and the Oder. We must create a mobile reserve. I request at least 6 panzer divisions. 6 panzer divisions, Hitler repeats, leaning back. You shall have them. The room freezes. Everyone in uniform knows the truth. There are no 6 panzer divisions to give. Not really. Somewhere, there are shattered remnants bearing those proud numbers, but the regiments exist mainly as files in cabinets, their tanks as promises in a factory that Allied bombers visit every week. From where? My Führer Guderian asks quietly. Hitler lifts his chin. From the west. Rundstedt does not need all his armored divisions. The Americans are already beaten. And the Führer Reserve still has units not yet committed. There are new panzer formations being created in Bohemia and Moravia. I have ordered it. Guderian blinks once. You can almost hear the thought forming behind his eyes. The Führer Reserve. Again, phantom troops conjured by decree. My Führer, he says carefully. The so-called panzer divisions in the reserve have no tanks. Some have no motor transport at all. They are panzer divisions only in name. Hitler waves a trembling hand. Names can be changed. Tanks can be assigned. It is a question of will. The German soldier is superior to the Russian. 10 to 1. If he has faith and discipline, he will hold. You generals calculate only in numbers. You do not understand the power of faith. For a heartbeat. Silence. You look at Guderian and see something harden in his face. He has commanded real panzer divisions, once made of steel and flesh, not of ink and hope. He knows that faith does not fill fuel tanks or stop cornet shells. The Russians, he says, slower now, have more tanks in that sector than we have on the entire Eastern Front. They have command of the air. Our infantry has no anti-tank weapons left. We cannot hold a static line against that. The only solution is maneuver, a flexible defense. Hitler leans forward, eyes narrowing. No retreat, he says. No maneuver. We will hold where we stand. Every fortress is a bastion of German will. Fortress Warsaw, Fortress Breslau, Fortress Königsberg. They will tie down Russian forces for months. They will bleed them white. That is how we will win time. Fortress cities. You can almost see them on the map as he speaks. Little black circles of brick and civilians, ordered to die in place so that arrows on paper can remain unmoved. Someone at the table mutters, barely audible. Win time for what? Hitler hears it. His head snaps around. For the miracle weapons, he says sharply. For the new U-boats, the jets, the V-rockets. for the splitting of the enemy alliance. The Americans and the British will turn against the Bolsheviks. They cannot endure such losses. Once the Russians are defeated in the east, the west will fall into our hands like a ripe fruit. But first we must show strength. We must show that we do not yield a single step. Guderian looks around the table. He sees Keitel, nodding furiously. Jodl, eyes lowered. Bormann, lips pressed into a thin, satisfied line. No one will support him openly. Not here. Not in front of this man who still holds absolute power over their careers and their lives. He realizes that they are no longer discussing strategy. They are listening to a man explain a fantasy and calling it a plan. When the conference ends, the officers file out into the corridor. You follow Guderian as he strides toward his office, his boots striking sparks of anger from the stone. Once inside, he slams the door and throws his cap on the desk. He has gone mad, he says flatly to his adjutant. His voice is not dramatic, just tired, completely mad. He lives in another world. He thinks armies can be created with words. He thinks cities can stop tanks. The adjutant says nothing. What is there to say? Outside, beyond the concrete and the maps and the orders, trains packed with civilians are already backing up on snow-covered sidings, waiting for permission that will never come. In East Prussia and Silesia, men, women, and children are still in their homes because their leader has forbidden evacuation. Retreat is treason. Reality is treason. In the underground heart of the Reich, its generals have just watched the last bridge between war and reality collapse. The man at the top is no longer misjudging the situation. He is inventing another one. January 13th, 1945, Berlin. The same underground situation room, the same green-shaded lamps. But the maps on the table have changed. Blue German lines that once ran along the Vistula now lie crumpled in a wastebasket. You stand pressed against the wall as officers hurry in, summoned on short notice. Guderian is already at the table. Cheeks flushed, spectacles slightly askew. A fresh operations map is pinned down with coffee cups and cigarette cases. Thick red arrows drive westward from the Vistula like knife thrusts. Baranov, Magnusu, Puławy. Names that only days ago were bridgeheads now mark the starting points of a Soviet flood. The offensive began at 0430, Guderian reports. Voice tight, he points with his stick, jabbing hard enough to tear the paper. Heavy artillery preparation. Then massed tanks. They have smashed through 4th Panzer Army here. Entire corps have been overrun. Army Group A is disintegrating. Hitler sits stiffly at the head of the table. Knuckles white where his hands grip the armrests. His face is pale, eyes shadowed. The tremor in his left hand is worse now. It taps a nervous rhythm against the wood. We still hold Warsaw, he says, almost to himself. The fortresses will stand firm. Your reports are exaggerated, as always. The Russians lack the motorization for a deep advance. They will bog down. Guderian's composure cracks. He takes a step closer, the stick trembling in his hand. Bog down, he repeats. My Führer, they are already across the Naru. Reports from the front say the infantry is fleeing, mixed with refugees on the roads. The chain of command has collapsed. If we do not order a general withdrawal to the Oder now, this very hour, there will be nothing left to withdraw. A muscle jumps in Hitler's jaw. Cowards, he mutters. Defeatists. I gave them clear orders to hold their positions. Anyone who abandons his post without permission will be shot. You will send that order at once. Keitel scribbles, grateful for something concrete to do. Jodl watches Guderian, eyes wary. Knowing what is coming, Guderian's voice rises. You cannot shoot an entire army. My Führer, they are being overrun. This is not a question of morale, but of physics. There are no reserves, no fuel, no anti-tank weapons. We must trade space for time, or we will lose both. Hitler slams his fist onto the armrest. The sound echoes. Germany has no more space to trade. He snaps. We defend every village, every crossroads. Not one step back. The Eastern Territories are sacred German soil. To give them up voluntarily would be treason. I will not put my signature under such a crime. The words hit the room like a verdict. You see Guderian's face go very still. For a long moment he does not speak. Then, with visible effort, he swallows his anger. Then, at least authorize the evacuation of civilians from East Prussia and Silesia, he says. If the army must stand fast, let the people go. The roads are still open. We can save hundreds of thousands. Hitler's eyes flick toward Bormann, who sits at the side of the table like a dark shadow. Bormann leans forward, voice smooth. Our people must show the same heroic spirit as the soldiers. My Führer, he says. Flight encourages panic. It is better they remain at their posts to support the troops, to show faith in the ultimate victory. Hitler nods slowly. Exactly. There will be no evacuation. Whoever speaks of retreat or flight is a saboteur. The eastern populations will hold. They will shame the soldiers into fighting. For a heartbeat. The only sound is the soft scratching of Keitel's pencil writing the death sentence of entire provinces. You imagine the frozen roads in East Prussia, the horse-drawn carts, the mothers with children wrapped in blankets, waiting for orders that will never come. Reality is there, in the snow and the fear and the distant thunder of guns. But down here, in the concrete womb of the Reich, another reality is being written with ink. Hitler leans forward again, suddenly animated. New formations will be created at once. He declares, we will form an army group for the defense of the Oder Line, a new command, with fresh authority, Army Group Vistula. It will stop the Russians in their tracks. Jodl hesitates. With what troops? My Führer. Hitler waves the question away. You will find them. Fragments, training units, police regiments, Volkssturm battalions. Everything. Put them together under a firm commander and they will fight like lions. The Russians are exhausted already. One firm stand and their advance will collapse. Imaginary strength again. A name, a line on a map, where in reality there are only shattered units and old men with hunting rifles. Later that afternoon, another conference. This time the table is covered with maps of East Prussia and the Baltic. The red tide is lapping at Königsberg, cutting off the northeastern provinces from the rest of Germany. Field Marshal Heinz Guderian and General Reinhard Gehlen present intelligent Soviet spearheads moving to the coast, the danger of encirclement. Their proposal is simple pull. German forces back to a shorter line. Sacrifice some ground to save the army. Hitler listens, eyes hooded. Königsberg will be a fortress. He says at last, the whole of East Prussia will be a fortress. They will tie down Russian forces indefinitely. We cannot give up the province of our great kings. It will stand as a bastion of German resistance. Tell the commanders there they are to fight to the last man. No breakout, no retreat. Guderian starts to answer, then stops himself. You can almost see the realization settle over the officers around the table like snow on broken branches. The pattern is clear now. There is no longer any room in these decisions for logistics, for terrain, for the lives of soldiers or civilians. There is only will, only symbolism, only the refusal to admit that the war cannot be won. Reality is pounding at the gates of the Reich with artillery and tank tracks. But the man at the top has chosen to fight a different battle, one waged entirely in his head, on maps where lost divisions can be summoned back with the stroke of a pencil, and cities can become immortal simply because he declares them so. And in the dim light of the bunker, the generals realize that their true enemy is no longer just the Red Army or the advancing Allies. It is the growing gulf between the war they are actually fighting and the one their leader insists on imagining. January 24th, 1945. Berlin. The concrete walls of the Situation Room sweat with condensation. Maps have been changed twice already today, as reports from the east arrive faster than anyone can absorb them. Each time, the blue German lines move closer to the heart of the Reich. You stand at the back once more, watching as Hitler shuffles in, his walk now a stiff, shuffling gait. His left arm hangs awkwardly. The tremor in his hand is constant, but his eyes burn with a ferocious, almost desperate intensity. On the table in front of him lies a fresh chart of northern Poland and Pomerania. The Vistula line is gone. Red arrows drive past Wadz, across the Wartha, heading straight toward the Oder. Between those red thrusts and Berlin, the map is almost empty. Guderian stands at the table already, his jaw clenched, his uniform tunic unbuttoned at the neck as if he has just run to get here. Next to him is General Alfred Jodl, expression carefully neutral, pencil poised. Keitel is rigid at attention, eyes fixed ahead like a man in front of a firing squad. Hitler lowers himself into his chair. "We will form a new army group," he says without preamble. "For the defense of the Oder and the approaches to Berlin, Army Group Vistula. It will stabilize the front and hurl the enemy back into the river." Guderian leans forward. "My Führer, that is exactly what I proposed, but to make such a command effective, we must appoint an experienced field commander. Kesselring is still in Italy, but Schörner or Model are available. They know how to handle crisis situations. They have the respect of the troops." Hitler raises his hand, palm outward. "I've already decided on the commander." He says, "Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler." The words drop into the room like a shell. For a second, no one moves. You can feel the shock ripple through the officers along the wall. Himmler, the gaunt, bespectacled head of the SS, architect of terror, a man whose experience of front-line command is limited to parades and inspections. Guderian actually forgets himself. Himmler, he repeats, staring. "My Führer." The Reichsführer has never commanded an army group. He has no experience of mobile warfare, no understanding of combined arms operations. At this moment, we need the very best professional soldier available, or we will lose the entire northern wing. Hitler's eyes flash. "Professional soldiers have brought us to this situation," he snaps. "They have doubted, retreated, sabotaged my orders. The Reichsführer is loyal. He has proven his steadfastness. He will carry out my will without hesitation. That is what is needed now. Faith, fanaticism, not cautious staff calculations." Keitel nods at once, as if this settles the matter. Jodl looks down at his papers. Guderian opens his mouth, then closes it again. You see the realization pass over his face. Logic no longer matters. Competence no longer matters. Only loyalty and obedience to one man's shrinking world. Hitler turns to Jodl. "Draw up the order," he says. "Army Group Vistula will be composed of the 2nd Army, the 11th SS Panzer Army, and all available formations in Pomerania and West Prussia. It will strike north from the Stargard area, split the Russian spearhead, and throw them back. A counter-offensive. Code name Operation Solstice. A bold blue arrow appears on the map, drawn by Jodl's careful hand, cutting into the red tide. It looks impressive. On paper. In reality, everyone in the room knows what those formations actually are. 2nd Army is a collection of exhausted remnants. 11th SS Panzer Army exists mostly as a file in a cabinet and some half-trained troops in a training area. Tanks are counted in handfuls, not battalions. Fuel is nearly gone. Guderian makes one last attempt. "My Führer, The forces you plan to use are fragments. There are no fully equipped panzer divisions left in that sector. At best, we can scrape together battle groups. We must shorten the line, not extend ourselves with new offensives based on units that exist only in name. Hitler shakes his head sharply. You're always talking about units that exist only in name, he says with bitter sarcasm. Do you think the Russians have real divisions everywhere? They bluff, they concentrate. We can do the same. We will give the units proud names, restore their old numbers. The spirit of the old divisions will live on in the new. That is what counts. Imaginary divisions again. Spirits and names instead of fuel and steel. 3 days later, Schneidemühl, Pomerania. A cold wind cuts across the airfield as a black SS car pulls up outside the newly established Army Group Vistula headquarters. Inside, in a drafty mansion commandeered for the purpose, staff officers hunch over maps and message pads, trying to turn Hitler's grand arrow into an actual order of battle. You walk along the corridor as Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler arrives, his black uniform at odds with the muddied field gray around him. He looks around with a mixture of curiosity and unease, like a civilian let into a restricted area. In the operations room, General Walter Wenck, a young, energetic officer, stands by the map, waiting. He has been trying to create something coherent out of the rubble of shattered corps, police regiments, Volkssturm and convalescent units. His casualty lists are longer than his order of battle. Himmler removes his cap, tucks it under his arm, and peers at the map. So, he says, adjusting his spectacles. This is the situation. The Führer wishes us to strike here and here. Correct, he points at the blue arrows as if they are train routes. We will show the army how the SS fights. Wenck hesitates, then answers cautiously. Reichsführer. At present, we have only 2 understrength panzer divisions ready, and they are short of tanks. Several units exist only as headquarters staffs without troops. If we attack on this scale, we will simply expose ourselves. Himmler frowns. The Führer told me there are 6 panzer divisions here. 11th SS Panzer Army is supposed to be powerful. Where are they? They are on paper. Wenck says before he can stop himself. We are trying to make them real. For a moment, Himmler just stares at him, then his face hardens. You must not talk like that, he says. The Führer believes in these formations. Therefore they exist. Your duty is to make his vision reality, not contradict it. The problem is not lack of tanks. It is lack of faith. I will report this defeatist attitude if it continues. That night, a call comes from Berlin. The line crackles with distance and urgency. You're in the corner of the room as Wenck stands by the telephone, receiver pressed tight to his ear. On the other end, the familiar voice rants and breaks, alternating between icy contempt and wild exhortation. You will attack on schedule. Hitler is shouting, no postponements, no excuses. The Russians are at the end of their strength. A hard blow and they will crumble. Victory or death. I will not tolerate any more cowardice from my generals. Wenck listens, jaw tight, saying only, Jawohl, mein Führer at the right moments. When he hangs up, he looks older. Around him, the staff officers stare at their maps. The blue arrow of Operation Solstice still slashes boldly into the red. On the actual ground outside, what will move along that arrow are scattered battle groups, under-fueled tanks, boys from the Hitler youth with Panzerfausts and fear in their stomachs. In Berlin, Hitler sees an army group commanded by his loyal Reichsführer, 6 panzer divisions, and a decisive counterstroke that will restore the front in Schneidemühl. The generals see something else. They see orders written in delusion, demanding miracles from ghosts. They see a leader who has not just misread the battlefield, but abandoned it entirely for a world where willpower alone can stop T-34s. February 16th, 1945. Pomerania. The snow along the roadside is churned grey by tank tracks and boots. The sky is low and iron-colored. Somewhere ahead, artillery rumbles like a constant storm. You stand in a cramped field headquarters near Stargard, watching officers crowd around a map pasted onto a door. Blue arrows, meant to mark the thrust of Operation Solstice, sag like wilted flowers. Red counters with penciled sickles and stars push relentlessly west. General Walther Wenck, his arm in a sling from a recent car accident, leans over the table, trying to make sense of streams of bad news. Battalion after battalion reports the same story: fuel gone, tanks abandoned, infantry scattered. 11th SS Panzer Army reports its attack has stalled. An operations officer reads, "Enemy superior in tanks and artillery. Heavy losses. Request permission to withdraw to previously prepared positions." Wenck rubs his forehead. "Previously prepared positions," he repeats quietly. "We don't even have shovels." The telephone rings. Every head turns. The duty officer snatches it up, listens, then looks at Wenck. Berlin. Herr Generaloberst. The Führer. The room stills. Wenck takes the receiver. "Mein Führer." Wenck speaking. The voice on the other end is thin with distance and fury, but unmistakable. "What is this nonsense about withdrawals Hitler demands? You attack, Wenck, attack. I gave you 6 panzer divisions. You have every advantage. The Russians are at the end of their forces. If you show resolve, you will smash them." Wenck glances at the map, at the handful of blue counters left to represent his armored strength. He chooses his words carefully. "My Führer, the divisions are at a fraction of their authorized strength. Some have only a few tanks operational. We are outnumbered in the air and on the ground. If we do not pull back to shorter lines, we will be destroyed in the open." "On the line," Hitler's voice rises, ragged with rage. "Excuses. Always excuses. Cowardice. Betrayal. I am surrounded by incompetence. You have everything you need. What you lack is faith. I demand that you renew the attack at once. Victory or death. There will be no retreat. Do you understand?" Wenck closes his eyes for a moment. When he answers, his voice is steady. "Jawohl. Mein Führer." He hangs up slowly, holding the receiver a moment longer than necessary, as if it weighs more than it should. Then he turns back to the map. "Inform the corps commanders," he says quietly. "The attack is to continue." One of the staff officers speaks before he can stop himself. "With what, Herr Generaloberst?" Wenck looks at him, and for a second, all the practiced phrases of a lifetime in uniform abandon him. "With orders," he says, "apparently. That is all we need." 2 days later, Berlin. The underground situation room is more crowded than ever. The air tastes of smoke and tension. The map of Pomerania is spread out before Hitler, red arrows now pushing almost to the Oder. Operation Solstice has failed. Army Group Vistula has not restored the front. It has barely delayed the inevitable. Guderian is there again, summoned back from the east. His face is pale with exhaustion and anger. He slaps a file down on the table so hard that dust jumps from the surface. Army Group Vistula has been driven back across the Oder, he reports. The remnants are streaming west. The Russians are less than 100 kilometers from Berlin. We must abandon Pomerania and Silesia at once, pull everything back behind the Oder, and form a continuous front. There is no alternative. Hitler glares at him, eyes bloodshot. "No alternative," he repeats. "There is always an alternative to cowardice. The troops retreated without permission. They disobeyed my order to stand fast. Himmler will court-martial the culprits. If necessary, we will form blocking detachments. Anyone who retreats without orders will be shot on the spot." Guderian's temper, held in check for weeks, finally boils through. He steps closer to the table, hands flat on the map. Mein Führer, you cannot conjure divisions out of thin air. We have no reserves, no fuel. The Eastern Front is held together with stragglers and boys from the Hitler Youth. You talk of court-martials as if fear of punishment can replace artillery. Hitler leans forward, his face twisting, voice rising to a hoarse shout. You will not tell me what is possible, he cries. You and your so-called professionals have sabotaged my orders for years. You allowed the Russians to reach the Vistula. You abandoned the Baltic states. Now you come to me and speak of impossibilities. I will not listen. I know better. The fate of Germany is decided by my will, not by your calculations. For a moment, the room seems to tilt. You see officers exchange quick, stunned glances. It is not the first tirade they have heard, but there is something different now, something raw, more unhinged. Guderian straightens slowly. His voice, when he speaks again, is quiet, if that is your view. My Führer, then I can no longer fulfill my responsibilities. Either you give your generals the freedom to conduct operations according to the situation, or you must relieve them. But do not expect miracles from men whose hands you have tied behind their backs. Hitler stares at him, breathing hard. Very well, he says at last, the words bitten off. You wish to resign your post. I accept. You are relieved as Chief of the General Staff. Others will do what you have failed to do. A strange silence falls. It is as if a pillar has just been pulled from under the ceiling. Keitel looks stunned. Jodl lowers his eyes. Guderian salutes. A short, precise motion. As you wish, mein Führer. He turns and walks out, boots ringing on the concrete floor. No one moves to stop him. You watch him go and realize what has just happened. One of the last remaining voices in the room willing to argue from reality has been removed, not by enemy fire, but by a leader who cannot bear to hear facts that contradict his fantasies. Hitler turns back to the map. His shoulders slump for a moment. Then he straightens again. That uncanny energy flaring. We will create new reserves, he says. The Volkssturm will be mobilized in full. Every man from 16 to 60 will fight. New panzer divisions will be formed. Speer has promised me increased production. The enemy will exhaust himself at our borders. And then we will strike the final blow. Phantom armies again. Phantom production. Phantom strength. In the corridor outside, Guderian pauses, one hand on the wall. His adjutant hovers uncertainly. He does not see it, Guderian murmurs, almost to himself. He cannot see it. The war is lost, but he talks of victory or death as if both were still options. There is only one left. He refuses to choose, so he drags everyone with him, down below. The conferences will go on, the maps will be updated, the orders will be signed, but for the generals who remain, something fundamental has shifted. They no longer ask themselves whether Hitler is right or wrong about individual battles. They ask whether he is even inhabiting the same reality. And with the Russians approaching the Oder and the Allies closing in from the west, they know that the final act of this war will be fought under the command of a man who has chosen delusion over truth, even as the Reich crumbles around him. April 22nd, 1945, Berlin, the Führerbunker. Outside, the city is a furnace. Soviet artillery beats a steady rhythm on the streets above, shaking dust from the ceiling of the concrete warren below. Inside the main conference room, the air smells of sweat, cordite dust tracked in on boots, and the sour tang of too many exhausted men sharing too little oxygen. You take your place against the wall, behind a line of staff officers. On the table in front of Adolf Hitler lies the last honest map of the Third Reich. Berlin is there at the center, a tight knot of streets and canals. Around it, in red pencil, are Soviet army symbols, thick and overlapping, like a noose already drawn tight. To the west, there is almost nothing, a few blue marks, here and there. scattered along the Elbe. The empty spaces between them are more eloquent than any report. Hitler enters slowly, one hand on the doorframe as if steadying himself. His face is pale, skin drawn tight over the bones. The tremor in his left hand is constant now, twitching against the fabric of his trousers. He does not look at anyone as he takes his place at the head of the table. Around him gather Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Jodl, General Hans Krebs, General Wilhelm Burgdorf. At the far end sits General Alfred Jodl's operations officer, the latest casualty in a line of men tasked with making sense of numbers that refuse to obey the wishes of the man in front of them. The briefing begins. The duty officer at the map points with a stick that quivers slightly. Enemy forces have broken through here, at Lichtenberg, and here, at Pankow. He says, "Our defensive sectors are compressed. Communications with many units are lost. We must assume several divisions no longer exist as cohesive formations." Hitler stares at the map, eyes hooded. "What of Army Detachment Steiner?" he demands suddenly. He was to attack from the north, drive into the Soviet flank, relieve the pressure on the city. Why has Steiner not attacked? A thin silence follows. Men look at one another, then away. No one seems eager to be the one to say it. Finally, Jodl clears his throat. "Mein Führer." Steiner reports that he does not have the strength to carry out the ordered attack. Jodl says carefully. His corps has been reduced. Several battalions exist only on paper. He has almost no heavy weapons and very little ammunition. He cannot mount an offensive in his current condition. For a heartbeat. Nothing moves. Then Hitler's face changes. The pallor flushes to an unhealthy red. His shoulders jerk. Not enough strength, he rasps. Not enough strength, he has my orders. That is his strength. He has betrayed me, like all the others. Cowards, traitors, saboteurs. Everyone has lied to me. Everyone. Keitel starts to speak, then stops as Hitler pushes himself up from the chair. He does not stand so much as erupt. His hands tremble. His voice rises to a hoarse, broken shout. "The war is lost," he cries. Lost because of them, not because of me. I gave clear orders. If they had been carried out, the Russians would have been thrown back to the Vistula. The Western allies would have been driven into the sea. But my generals have failed me at every turn. They have no courage, no loyalty. The words ricochet off the concrete walls. You feel the room shrink around them. Keitel's face crumples. Burgdorf stares at the table. Krebs looks down, his expression frozen. This is not the Hitler of the victories. Not even the Hitler of the rages they have grown used to. This is something else. A man whose inner world has finally torn free from anything outside himself. For a moment, the tirade breaks. Hitler sags back into the chair, breathing hard. His voice, when it returns, is thick and bitter. "If you think the war is lost, you can all go," he mutters. "You can go to the front and shoot yourselves. I will stay here in Berlin. I will fight to the last bullet. I will not leave. Victory or death. I choose death before capitulation." The phrase lands differently this time. Once it had been a slogan, a threat thrown at enemies and subordinates alike. Now it sounds like the muttering of a man who has mistaken his own ruin for a final act of heroism and demands that an entire nation follow him into the grave. The briefing limps on. Krebs, trying to steady the atmosphere, points to the map west of Berlin. 12th Army, under General Wenck, is here, he says. If he turns east instead of continuing against the Americans, he may be able to relieve the city and establish a corridor to the Elbe. It will require all available strength. Hitler sits up again, the old, feverish light flickering back into his eyes. "Yes," he says quickly. Wenck will come. He is loyal. He will turn his army. The Americans will not press. They will understand that Bolshevism must be stopped. Wenck will break through from the west. Steiner from the north, and we will crush the Soviets between us. The situation will stabilize. On the map, his finger traces arrows that look painfully familiar to you now. Thin blue lines stabbing into a sea of red, drawn by a hand that no longer cares what real units are available at the end of those arrows. Krebs hesitates. Mein Führer, 12th Army is heavily engaged against the Americans. Their strength is limited. Reports indicate they are already retreating on several sectors. To disengage and turn east under these conditions may not be possible. Not possible. Hitler snaps. It must be possible, therefore it is. Send the order. Wenck will attack at once, toward Potsdam. Steiner will assemble all available forces for a thrust from the north. Anyone who talks of impossibility is a defeatist. I will not tolerate defeatism at this stage. You see it in the faces around the table. No one believes these plans will work. Many know, in detail, why they cannot. There is no fuel, no ammunition. The units Hitler speaks of in such confident tones are skeletons, fragments, headquarters without troops. Wenck cannot punch through the Soviet ring with an army that barely exists. Steiner cannot attack with forces that are already in flight. Yet the orders will go out, written in clear, precise staff German, signed and sealed. Somewhere, officers will receive them, look at their handfuls of men and battered guns, and understand that the world in which those orders make sense is not the one they inhabit. When the conference ends, you follow Krebs into the corridor. He walks slowly, hands clasped behind his back, head bowed. At last he stops in a side room, away from the others. Keitel and Jodl join him. For a moment, none of them speaks. Then Jodl says quietly, he believes Wenck still has an army. Keitel nods, eyes wet. He believes a great many things. Krebs looks from one to the other. His voice is almost a whisper. We have been fighting 2 wars, one against the enemy outside, one against the fantasies in that room. The first we have lost on the battlefield. The second we can never win, because reality has no place in it. Outside, another shell lands close, the impact shaking dust from the light fittings. Down the corridor, Hitler is already in his private room, bent once more over maps that no longer connect to the world above. He moves counters that do not represent real divisions and speaks of counterstrokes that will never be launched. He talks of betrayal, of miracles, of final victories written in air. For his generals, the realization is complete. The man who once gambled and won on the fields of Poland and France now fights only in the echo chamber of his own mind. He forbids retreats from positions that no longer exist, invents armies from empty depots, demands victory or death in a war where Germany has long since run out of choices. In the end, there is no single dramatic moment when they decide he has lost his mind. It is this, instead, the accumulation of briefings where facts bounce off him like rain off armor, of orders based on ghosts, of maps where the blue lines are lies and the red ones are the only truth left. They stand in the bunker, listening to another plan drawn from nothing, and understand that the fate of Germany is no longer being decided by strategy or courage or sacrifice. It is being decided by the delusions of a man who can no longer see the difference between his will and the world. Above them, the city burns. Below, their leader fights on inside a war that exists only inside his head.